Top 10 Bizarre Connections Between Famous People and Notorious Murderers. Hey there, welcome to Odd Occasions, where we explore the strangest, most fascinating, and downright bizarre connections in history. In today's episode, we're diving into some truly chilling encounters between famous people and notorious murderers. From actors and athletes to even presidents, these stories will make you question just how small the world really is. Get ready for a countdown of the top 10 bizarre connections between famous people and murderers. You won't believe some of these twisted links. Celebrities meet countless people on their path to fame. Fans, critics, colleagues. But sometimes, within the sea of faces, there lurks a monster. Not just in passing, but in the form of real-life, notorious murderers. These next stories prove that you should be careful about the company you keep. Let's jump right into number 10. Number 10. Peter Lorre and the Hillside Stranglers. Peter Lorre was famous for his sinister roles, particularly in the 1931 classic M, where he portrayed a child murderer. But little did he know, his dark on-screen persona would one day save his daughter's life, long after his own death. In the late 1970s, the Hillside Stranglers, Angelo Buono and Kenneth Bianchi, were terrorizing Los Angeles, kidnapping and killing young women. One night in 1977, Catherine Lorre Baker, Peter Lorre's daughter, unknowingly hitched a ride with the infamous duo. They planned to make her their next victim, until she revealed who her father was. She happened to be carrying a picture of herself with Peter Lorre, her famous dad. The two killers, big movie buffs, immediately recognized the Hungarian-American actor and began gushing about his roles in Casablanca and The Maltese Falcon. In what can only be described as an eerie twist of fate, Buono and Bianchi decided to let her go. Whether it was out of respect for her father's iconic filmography or fear of the attention a high-profile victim would bring, we'll never truly know. Number 9. Mark Jackson and the Menendez brothers. In 1989, Eric and Lyle Menendez seemed to be living the dream. After the brutal murders of their wealthy parents, Jose and Kitty Menendez, the brothers inherited a fortune. With nearly $700,000 in insurance payouts, they splurged on luxury cars, designer clothes, and everything that symbolized wealth. But behind the scenes, they were hiding the darkest truth of all. They had been the ones responsible for their parents' deaths. Big fans of basketball, the Menendez brothers couldn't resist catching a game at Madison Square Garden. That year, they sat courtside to watch NBA stars Patrick Ewing and Mark Jackson play for the New York Knicks. At some point during the game, a photographer captured a shot of Mark Jackson in action, with Eric and Lyle seated in the background, casually enjoying the game, as if nothing was wrong. At the time, no one knew the chilling significance of that photo. It was later used on Jackson's 1990 NBA Hoops trading card. Decades passed before anyone realized the two spectators in the background were, in fact, the infamous Menendez brothers. That photograph became a haunting symbol of the bizarre intersection between sports and a gruesome family crime. Years later, Lyle Menendez confirmed in an interview that it was indeed him and his brother at that game, forever linking their notorious story to an innocent moment in NBA history. Sometimes, the darkest secrets are hidden in plain sight. Number 8. Alan Alda and Edward Edwards. The goal of the popular game show To Tell the Truth is simple. Figure out who's telling the truth and who's lying. But for Edward Edwards, lying came as second nature. Edwards had a difficult start in life. His mother committed suicide when he was just a toddler, and as a teenager, he fell into a pattern of petty crime, burglaries, stints in juvenile facilities, anything to get by. By 1955, his life of crime caught up with him when he was arrested for a break-in. But instead of serving his time, Edwards escaped from prison and went on a spree of armed robberies, landing him on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list. Eventually, Edwards was recaptured and sent to Leavenworth Prison, where he supposedly turned his life around. By the 1970s, Edwards had transformed his image, becoming something of a minor celebrity on the lecture circuit, talking about his rehabilitation. This newfound fame earned him a spot on the game show To Tell the Truth in 1972, where he faced a panel of well-known celebrities, including the beloved Alan Alda. Alda, along with the rest of the panel, had no idea who they were dealing with. Edwards presented himself as a reformed man, but in reality, he was hiding a sinister secret. Only 2 panelists, Gene Rayburn and Peggy Cass, were able to pick out the real Edward Edwards from the imposters. But even they didn't realize the depth of his deception. In truth, Edwards was far from rehabilitated. Between 1977 and 1996, he would go on to murder at least 5 people, though many believe the true number could be much higher. Some even speculate, though the evidence is thin, that he may have been involved in notorious unsolved cases like the Zodiac killings, the West Memphis 3, and the murder of John Benet Ramsey. What's more plausible is his link to an earlier crime, the Lovers Lane murders of Larry Payton and Beverly Allen in 1960. If that connection is ever confirmed, it would mean that Edwards appeared on national television, posing as a model citizen in the middle of his killing spree. A chilling reminder that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who seem the most harmless. Number 7. Jeremy Bulloch and Mark Twitchell. Boba Fett might be one of the most feared bounty hunters in the galaxy, but in reality, his portrayer, Jeremy Bulloch, unknowingly crossed paths with a far more dangerous man, Mark Twitchell. Mark Twitchell, a Canadian filmmaker, was obsessed with the TV show Dexter, a series about a forensic detective who moonlights as a vigilante serial killer. Twitchell's fascination went way beyond typical fandom. On social media, he even posed as Dexter, adopting the character's dark persona in real life. But Twitchell didn't stop there. He created a short film titled House of Cards, in which a murderer lures men into a torture chamber by using fake online dating profiles. Here's where it gets chilling. He wasn't just making a movie. He was living it. In real life, Twitchell set up a trap for 2 men. The first, Gilles Tétrault, narrowly escaped, but the second, Johnny Altinger, wasn't so lucky. When Twitchell was arrested, he insisted to the police that it was all just part of his filmmaking process. He even mentioned that he had directed a fan project called Star Wars: Secrets of the Rebellion, where he convinced Jeremy Bulloch to reprise his role as Boba Fett. In the end, though, it was clear Twitchell wasn't just a filmmaker. He was a real-life killer, hiding behind the mask of fandom. Number 6. Tom Petty and Mark Rogowski. Mark Rogowski was a skateboarding icon in the 1980s, admired by aspiring skaters everywhere. Alongside legends like Tony Hawk and Steve Caballero, Rogowski helped turn skateboarding into a national phenomenon. But by the end of the decade, his life would take a dark and violent turn. A free fall, both literal and metaphorical. Rogowski briefly stepped into the mainstream when he appeared in the music video for Tom Petty's hit song, Free Fallin'. In the video, Rogowski skates a half-pipe, performing tricks while his girlfriend, Brandy McLean, watches. The song's lyrics describe a relationship in turmoil, and in hindsight, the connection is eerily fitting for what was to come in Rogowski's own life. Not long after the video's release, Rogowski experienced his first major fall, this time from a hotel window in West Germany. The near-fatal incident left him severely injured, and afterward, Rogowski turned to evangelical Christianity for comfort. But his newfound faith didn't quiet the storm inside him. As his relationship with Brandy McLean unraveled, Rogowski grew obsessed. his jealousy and frustration boiled over. And on March 20th, 1991, when a mutual friend named Jessica Bergston reached out to him, Rogowski saw an opportunity for revenge. He brutally raped and murdered Bergston as a twisted way of punishing McClane, whom he blamed for his downward spiral. It was a horrifying end to a career that had once seemed so promising. Mark Rogowski went from a hero in the skateboarding world to a convicted murderer, all while his life mirrored the lyrics of the song he once skated to, a free fall that he could never recover from. Number 5. Richard Linklater and Bernhardt Tiede. Richard Linklater had already made his mark as a filmmaker with hits like Dazed and Confused and School of Rock. He could have easily rested on those accomplishments, but in 2011 he took on a challenge that had nothing to do with film, and everything to do with justice. Bernie Tiede was no innocent man. He openly admitted to shooting his 81-year-old companion Marjorie Nugent and hiding her body in a freezer. A shocking crime, no doubt. But Linklater saw something more to Tiede's story. Linklater believed that Tiede's actions were driven by a history of abuse. New evidence suggested that Tiede had serious psychological issues, and this prompted Linklater, along with others, to petition the courts to reconsider his sentence. The goal wasn't to prove Tiede's innocence, but to acknowledge the mitigating factors that led him to such a violent act. From 2014 to 2016, Tiede was actually released on bond, waiting for a new trial. His release came with a strange twist. He moved in with Linklater. Yes, the man who directed Bernie, the dark comedy based on Tiede's life, invited him to live in a garage apartment behind his home in Austin, Texas. But this story doesn't end like some quirky sitcom. When the case went to trial again, the jury reviewed the new evidence but ultimately decided it wasn't enough to reduce Tiede's responsibility for the crime. His sentence was extended from 50 years to 99 years, or life. It's a strange connection between an iconic filmmaker and a convicted murderer. A reminder that sometimes even the most compelling stories don't have happy endings. Number 4. Groucho Marx and Eugene Leroy. Before Groucho Marx became the wisecracking mustachioed comedy legend we know, he was simply Julius Marx, a 14-year-old trying to find his way in showbiz. His first big break came from a man named Eugene Leroy, part of a vaudeville act known as the Leroy Trio. Leroy gave the young Marx his first job, singing backup for Leroy's drag performances. But it wasn't exactly the dream gig. Leroy took all the money from their performances and, worse, abandoned Marx in Denver, leaving the teenager to figure out how to survive. This early betrayal stayed with Marx, and for good reason. Years later, the story took a truly dark turn. An unclaimed trunk sat for weeks in New York's Grand Central Station. When authorities finally opened it, they found the dismembered body of Leroy's wife, Catherine Leroy Jackson. The trunk had been mailed to Jackson's secret lover. She had gambled that Leroy would never find out about her affair, and she lost that bet. Eugene Leroy was never seen again. A chilling end to a man who had once helped launch Groucho Marx's career, only to vanish into obscurity after a horrifying act of violence. Number 3. Ashton Kutcher and Michael Gargiulo. Ashton Kutcher was excited for his date. He and his new girlfriend, Ashley Ellerin, had plans to attend a Grammy Awards after-party. Kutcher arrived at her house that evening, knocked on the door, but there was no answer. Curious, he peeked through the window and noticed red stains on the carpet. He assumed it was spilled wine from an earlier party, thinking maybe she had left without him. What he didn't realize was that those red stains weren't wine, and that he had just stumbled upon a murder scene. Between 2001 and 2008, Michael Gargiulo, later dubbed the Hollywood Ripper, murdered 2 women and attempted to kill another. It's estimated that his total victim count could be closer to 10. One of his victims that night, Ashley Ellerin. Years later, Kutcher's testimony became crucial to the prosecution. In May 2019, Gargiulo was convicted of the murders in California, but sentencing has been delayed due to legal complexities. And here's the haunting part. Based on Gargiulo's timeline, it's possible, though never confirmed, that he was still inside the house when Kutcher knocked on the door. A chilling thought that leaves us wondering just how close Kutcher came to crossing paths with a killer that night. Number 2. Abraham Lincoln and the Donner Party. The Donner Party's tragic story of survival is still infamous, nearly 2 centuries later. Stranded in the Sierra Nevada during an unbearable winter, with food supplies running dangerously low, the group eventually resorted to cannibalism. Most of them did what they had to do, desperate to save their families. But there was one man whose story took a different turn. James Reed, a key member of the expedition, became infamous for a violent incident that occurred before the group got trapped. Reed got into a deadly altercation with fellow traveler John Snyder, after Snyder had been abusing Reed's cattle. In a fit of rage, Reed stabbed him to death. As punishment, the group banished Reed from the convoy. Ironically, this act of violence may have saved his life. While the rest of the group faced the horrors of starvation in the mountains, Reed survived, outliving most of the doomed travelers. Aware that things were going terribly wrong, he even sent a rescue mission to save the remaining members of the party. But here's the real twist. Before heading west, Reed had formed a friendship with a young Abraham Lincoln during the Black Hawk War. Reed had tried to convince Lincoln to leave Illinois and join him on the journey to California. Lincoln, who had helped Reed recover from a series of financial disasters, was tempted. Reed wanted to pay Lincoln back by offering him some of the land he planned to settle in California. Lincoln was ready to go until his wife, Mary Todd, persuaded him otherwise. If Lincoln had joined his old friend Reed, history might have been very different. The future president could have easily died on that mountain pass, alongside the rest of the Donner Party. Number 1. Wilbur Wright and Oliver Crook Haugh. It may have been an accident, or it may have been the first sign of Oliver Crook Haugh's deeply disturbed mind. Either way, no one could have predicted how an errant hockey stick would change the course of history. In 1885, young Oliver Haugh was known for terrorizing his neighborhood, just a bully, picking fights. During a local hockey game, tensions boiled over. In the chaos, Haugh swung his stick, striking a teenage Wilbur Wright square in the jaw. The blow was so severe that Wilbur needed false teeth and had to abandon his plans to attend Yale while he recovered. He stayed in Dayton to care for his ailing mother and work with his brother Orville. To take his mind off his misfortune, Wilbur threw himself into reading. This newfound passion sparked his fascination with flight, a fascination that would eventually lead to the Wright brothers' groundbreaking 1903 flight at Kitty Hawk. Oliver Haugh's place in history, however, is far less noble. Haugh's life took a dark turn. Fueled by cocaine-addled delusions, he began to dream of creating a new race of humans by eliminating the weak and sick. He went to medical school, not to heal, but to experiment. Along the way, he fell in love with a woman named Anna Margaret Eckley. They married, but his violent and adulterous ways drove her to try to leave him multiple times. Rumor has it, Haugh married up to 9 other women while still with Eckley. Everywhere he went, bodies seemed to follow, his patients, his lovers. After a brief stint in jail for disorderly conduct in Cleveland, Haugh returned to Dayton. His parents had cut him out of their will, and in a fit of rage, he threatened them. Then, on November 5, 1905, Haugh set fire to his parents' home, with his family inside. He was eventually connected to at least 13 suspicious deaths, though some believe the number could be even higher. Haugh's violence left a trail of destruction, impacting far more lives than he ever intended. Thanks for watching this spine-tingling episode of Odd Occasions. Who would have thought the paths of these famous figures crossed with some of history's most dangerous criminals? If you enjoyed this strange journey, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future dives into the odd and unusual. Let us know in the comments. Which connection shocked you the most? Until next time, stay curious.